The most dangerous weapon in the room wasn't a gun. It was a single word, and Lena heard it change. The Polaris suite was designed for quiet power, soft golden lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a mahogany table long enough to seat 12, though tonight only 5 chairs were filled. Crystal glasses, rare wine, sea bass plated like art. Billion-dollar decisions made in low voices. Lena moved between them like she didn't exist. White shirt, black vest, hair pulled back, eyes lowered just enough to seem respectful, never curious. She had perfected invisibility over the past 2 years. Invisible people survived. Invisible people kept their jobs. Invisible people didn't get destroyed. At the head of the table sat Mr. Kwan. Still, controlled, watching everything without appearing to move. His hands rested near a leather folder, his expression calm. Too calm. Across from him, 2 American executives leaned back comfortably, confident smiles, expensive watches catching the light. They believed they were winning tonight. Between them stood Julian, their translator, polished, charming, voice smooth as aged whiskey. Julian was the bridge between 2 worlds, and Lena knew bridges. Her father used to build them, literal ones, steel and concrete stretching across rivers. He taught her that a bridge fails not because of one loud explosion, but because of one weak joint no one notices in time. Integrity, he would say, is the only structure that cannot collapse. Lena hadn't thought about that in months, until tonight. She poured wine slowly as Mr. Kwan spoke in his native language, his tone cool and precise. "The liability clause is absolute," he said. "There will be no flexibility." His voice was steel. Julian smiled and translated. "Mr. Kwan believes there may be room for flexibility within the liability structure, depending on your proposed adjustments." Lena's hand froze mid-pour. That wasn't a small shift. That wasn't nuance. That was a rewrite. She didn't react outwardly. Years of discipline kept her face neutral. The wine continued flowing, deep red against crystal. Maybe she misheard. Maybe she misunderstood. She stepped back. Listened again. Mr. Kwan spoke once more, sharper this time. "This term is non-negotiable. If it is not accepted, we walk away." Julian turned smoothly. "Mr. Kwan says he's open to further discussion if both parties are willing to compromise." The Americans relaxed visibly. One even chuckled. Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't miscommunication. This was deliberate. She moved to clear plates, her heartbeat steady but heavy. Every word mattered here. Every adjective could shift millions of dollars. Julian wasn't translating. He was reshaping the deal. The Americans believed they were softening a powerful man. Mr. Kwan believed he was holding firm. 2 different realities, one voice controlling both. And Lena understood both languages perfectly. 2 years ago, she had lived in rooms like this, not as a server, but as a senior arbitration specialist. She negotiated cross-border disputes before breakfast. She dissected contracts for hidden poison. Until one lie destroyed everything. A fabricated email trail, a bribed technician, a whisper campaign that painted her as corrupt. Her career collapsed overnight. Her father, already wounded by his own corporate betrayal years earlier, never recovered from watching it happen to her. She disappeared after that, took this job, stayed silent. Tonight was not her fight. This was not her world anymore. She refilled water glasses while Julian continued his elegant sabotage. Another word shifted, another clause softened, another boundary erased. Mr. Kwan's posture changed slightly, subtle tension gathering in his shoulders. Something didn't feel right to him either, but without understanding the other side's true reaction, he had no proof. Lena felt the pressure building behind her eyes. If she spoke up, she would cause a scene in a private room filled with men who did not tolerate interruption. She would be fired instantly, possibly worse. If she stayed silent, a man would be betrayed in front of her, using language as the weapon. Silence had kept her safe for 2 years, but silence had also cost her everything. Julian leaned forward again. "Mr. Kwan appreciates your flexibility," he translated smoothly. That was the word, flexibility. Mr. Kwan had never said it. Lena's decision arrived quietly. Not dramatic, not loud. She reached for the most expensive bottle on the cart, a 1982 Chateau Margaux. Rare, revered, impossible to refuse. The perfect excuse to approach the head of the table. Her hands were steady as she uncorked it, muscle memory from a former life, control under pressure. She stepped to Mr. Kwan's side. "All eyes on the wine," she said gently in English, just loud enough for the room. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. In his language, precise, clear, unshaking. "Your translator is lying." For a split second, time stopped. Mr. Kwan's eyes sharpened instantly. Not confused, not surprised, aware. The wine flowed into his glass, dark and slow, and Lena realized she had just stepped back into a world that had once burned her alive.
Before we continue, if you were in Lena's position, would you have stayed silent or risked everything to speak up? Comment below. I really want to know what you would have done. And if you love intense, smart stories like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Now, let's step back into the Polaris suite. The wine was still pouring when Mr. Kwan's eyes changed. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't gasp. He didn't turn suddenly. But something sharpened. The calm surface of a lake turning into black ice. Lena straightened, placed the bottle gently on the table, and stepped back into her invisible position. Julian was mid-sentence. "And Mr. Kwan is willing to reconsider the enforcement timeline." "Stop." The single word cut through the room like a blade. Julian blinked. The Americans stiffened slightly. Mr. Kwan lifted his glass but didn't drink. He studied the wine for a moment, as if evaluating its color. Then he looked directly at Julian. "In English," Mr. Kwan said smoothly, his pronunciation flawless, "please repeat what I just said. Exactly." The air shifted. Julian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course," he replied. "You expressed openness to modifying—" "That is not what I said." The Americans exchanged confused glances. Mr. Kwan placed the wine glass down with a soft, deliberate click. "I said," he continued calmly, now addressing the Americans directly, "the liability clause is absolute. There will be no flexibility. If it is not accepted, we walk away." Silence fell heavy over the table. The Americans' expressions drained from confidence to calculation. Julian's posture stiffened. "That must be a misunderstanding," Julian said quickly. "Perhaps there was nuance." There was no nuance. Mr. Kwan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Lena stood near the wall, heart pounding but face neutral, a ghost again. Except now, the ghost had moved the chess piece. Mr. Kwan leaned back slightly. "For the past 40 minutes, I have stated firm conditions, yet your reactions suggested concessions I never offered." He turned his full attention to Julian. "Explain." Julian's composure began to crack. A faint sheen of sweat appeared near his temple. "I was ensuring a constructive tone. Sometimes direct translations can sound aggressive." "Truth does not require decoration," Mr. Kwan interrupted. The Americans were no longer smiling. One of them leaned forward slowly. Are you saying we've been receiving inaccurate translations? Mr. Kwan's gaze never left Julian. I am saying that words were changed. The air felt smaller. Julian's jaw tightened. This is absurd. I've worked internationally for 10 years. And tonight, Mr. Kwan said quietly, you worked against me. That was the moment it broke. Not loudly, not violently, but completely. The two security guards near the door, who had stood silent and still the entire evening, shifted their weight. Julian noticed. His confidence finally fractured. This is a misunderstanding, he insisted, voice rising slightly now. You're making a mistake to a minor phrasing issue. A minor phrasing issue, Mr. Kwan repeated softly, that shifts millions of dollars in liability. The Americans sat frozen. They hadn't been winning. They had been manipulated. Mr. Kwan turned to them calmly. Gentlemen, it appears you were negotiating based on information that did not originate from me. Their earlier certainty was gone. One cleared his throat. We were under the impression your position had softened. My position, Mr. Kwan replied, has not moved an inch. Julian pushed back slightly from the table. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Is it? Mr. Kwan asked. He switched languages suddenly, back to his own, and spoke a sentence sharp and direct. Julian hesitated. That hesitation lasted less than a second, but it was enough. Translate, Mr. Kwan commanded. Julian opened his mouth. Closed it. Sweat now visible along his hairline. The Americans stared. The silence became unbearable. Finally, Mr. Kwan translated his own words. I just asked you why Omnicorp is paying you. The room detonated without a sound. Julian went pale. That's insane. You can't just accuse... 2 weeks ago, Mr. Kwan continued calmly, a transfer was made from an Omnicorp subsidiary to an offshore account under your cousin's name. Lena's breath caught. He had already investigated. He had suspected something before she even spoke. You should have checked my language skills before accepting this assignment, Mr. Kwan added. The Americans leaned back slowly, shock turning into anger. You told us you were independent, one of them said to Julian. I am, Julian shot back. The security guard stepped forward. Not aggressively, just enough to make it clear. This was over. Mr. Kwan closed the leather folder in front of him. This meeting is concluded, he said. The Americans rose stiffly, humiliated and confused. Julian stood frozen. You're making a mistake, he whispered. No, Mr. Kwan replied. You did. The guards moved to escort Julian out. For a brief second, Julian's eyes scanned the room. They landed on Lena. Recognition. Understanding. She looked away. The door closed behind them. Silence returned to the Polaris suite. The deal was dead, the betrayal exposed. Mr. Kwan remained seated, still, controlled. Then he spoke without turning. Bring her here. Lena's stomach dropped. One of the guards opened the door slightly. He wants to see you. Every instinct told her to run. Instead, she walked forward, this time not invisible, this time seen. Mr. Kwan looked at her directly. You understood everything, he said. It wasn't a question. Lena swallowed. Yes. His eyes studied her carefully. A waitress does not usually dismantle corporate espionage during dinner. The room felt heavier now, more personal. Who are you? He asked. And for the first time in 2 years, Lena had to decide whether to stay buried or tell the truth.
Who are you? Mr. Kwan's voice wasn't angry. It was precise. Measured. Lena stood at the end of the long table,
the polished surface reflecting the chandelier above like a frozen sun. The chairs were empty now. The air still carried tension like static before lightning. She could lie. She could say she studied abroad. She could say she learned the language from family. She could walk away and keep her job. But something inside her was tired of hiding. "My name is Lena Wallace," she said evenly. 2 years ago, I was a senior associate at Sterling and Vance Global, International Arbitration. Mr. Kwan didn't blink. Continue. I specialized in cross-border disputes, contract enforcement, corporate negotiations. In rooms like this? He said. Yes. The word felt heavier than it should have. She hadn't spoken about her past in 2 years, not to anyone. I was framed, accused of leaking confidential documents during a major acquisition case. She forced herself to keep her voice steady. Digital evidence was planted. A junior IT technician testified against me. My firm cut ties immediately. My license was suspended pending investigation. No one wanted to wait for the truth. Mr. Kwan watched her the way a chess player studies a board, not for emotion, but for structure. And the truth? He asked. It never mattered. Silence stretched between them. My father, she added quietly, was a civil engineer. His company was destroyed by falsified structural reports years ago. A rival firm manipulated inspections, bribed officials. They ruined his reputation. He spent the rest of his life trying to clear his name. Her throat tightened, but she didn't stop. When I was accused, he tried to fight for me, hired lawyers, filed motions, spent everything we had. She looked down briefly. He died believing I would never recover. The room felt colder now. Mr. Kwan's expression did not soften, but something changed behind his eyes. Who was the rival firm? He asked. Omnicorp. The name hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Kwan leaned back slowly. Interesting. Lena's stomach dropped. You know them? They were the parent company of the 2 executives tonight. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. Julian wasn't random. The deal wasn't random. She hadn't stumbled into coincidence. She had walked straight back into the same battlefield. Mr. Kwan continued calmly. Omnicorp has attempted to interfere with my expansion into 3 markets over the past year. Deals collapsed unexpectedly. Terms shifted at the final stage. Trust dissolved. He paused. Tonight was not their first attempt. Lena felt the pieces sliding into place. They plant people, she said slowly. Yes. Inside negotiations. Yes. To weaken foundations. Mr. Kwan gave the smallest nod. They rarely attack directly. They introduce instability. Quietly. Precisely. 1,000 tiny cuts. Her father's bridge. Her career. The same pattern. I wasn't collateral damage, she whispered. No, Mr. Kwan said evenly. You were rehearsal. The words were brutal, but they felt true. She had been eliminated early, before she became a threat. Silence settled again. Finally, Mr. Kwan stood. You did something dangerous tonight. I know. You interfered in a matter involving powerful people. Yes. You exposed a man connected to a corporation that destroys reputations for strategy. She met his eyes. I'm aware. He studied her for a long moment. Why? He asked finally. The question was simple. The answer was not. Lena inhaled slowly. I know what it feels like to be betrayed by someone trusted. She swallowed. And I couldn't watch it happen again. Mr. Kwan walked toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. The world you left, he said quietly, is not gentle. I remember. If you step back into it, Omnicorp will notice.
She didn't respond. He turned slightly. "Go home," he said. The instruction caught her off guard. "Sir?" "Return to your life. Continue working. Say nothing." Confusion flickered across her face. "That's it?" "For now." He walked back to the table and closed the leather folder. "If you are telling the truth, then the evidence will exist." Her heart began to pound. "You're investigating?" "I always verify." She felt something unfamiliar rising inside her. Hope. "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. Mr. Kwan looked at her directly. "Because I do not tolerate weak joints in my structures." Her father's words echoed in her mind. A bridge with one weak joint is not a bridge. It is a beautifully engineered catastrophe. "You may go," he said. Lena turned toward the door. Her legs felt unsteady. As she reached the handle, his voice stopped her. "Ms. Wallace." She looked back. "If you are innocent," he said quietly, "then someone owes you a great deal more than an apology." For the first time in 2 years, she felt the ground beneath her shift. Not collapsing, rebuilding. 3 days passed. 3 long, silent days. Lena returned to work as if nothing had happened. She carried plates, refilled glasses, smiled politely. The Polaris suite stayed empty, a quiet reminder of the night everything shifted. Mr. Kwan hadn't called for her again. No message, no warning, no update. Part of her wondered if she had imagined the whole thing. Maybe he had verified enough to protect himself and decided she was irrelevant. Maybe she had stepped into the light for nothing. On the 4th afternoon, just before her shift ended, a sleek black car pulled up outside the restaurant. Not flashy, not loud, just deliberate. A man in a dark tailored suit stepped inside and asked for her by name. The staff looked confused. Lena's pulse quickened. The man approached her calmly and handed her a thick, sealed envelope. "Mr. Kwan requested this be delivered personally," he said. "Nothing more." He left immediately. Lena stood frozen for a moment before walking to the staff break room. Her hands trembled slightly as she tore open the envelope. Inside was not a letter. It was a dossier. Page after page of printed documents, email chains, bank transfers, internal memos, digital forensic reports. Her breath caught. Omnicorp. Her name appeared again and again. So did another name, Marcus Thorne. She remembered him instantly. Senior executive, cold smile. The man who oversaw the acquisition case she had worked on 2 years ago, the one that ended her career. She flipped through the pages. A financial trail from an Omnicorp subsidiary to an offshore account. The account belonged to the IT technician who testified against her. Timestamp analysis showing the so-called leaked emails were created on an Omnicorp internal server. Metadata proving the files were planted remotely onto her work laptop. Her knees felt weak. This wasn't suspicion. This was proof. Hard, detailed, devastating. They hadn't just framed her. They had engineered it, carefully, strategically. Her father had been right. They don't attack foundations loudly. They weaken them quietly until everything collapsed. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper. An address, Kwan Industries headquarters. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. No explanation, no signature, just a time and place. Lena sat there for several minutes, staring at the evidence. 2 years of shame, 2 years of silence, 2 years of believing the world had simply moved on without her. And now the truth sat in her hands. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't careless. She wasn't corrupt. She had been targeted, eliminated early because she was good. The next morning, Lena stood in front of the towering glass building of Kwan Industries. It rose into the sky like a statement, solid, untouchable. Very different from the fragile life she had been living. She wore the only suit she had kept from her old life, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, preserved in plastic at the back of her closet. She hadn't worn it in 2 years. It still fit. She stepped inside. Marble floors, clean lines, quiet authority. An executive assistant greeted her and escorted her directly to the top floor. The elevator doors opened into a vast office wrapped in glass. The city stretched below like a living blueprint. Mr. Kwan stood near the window. He didn't turn when she entered. "You've read it." "Yes." "Everything in that file is verified." She felt the weight of it again. "Why?" she asked quietly. He finally faced her. "Because Omnicorp has been undermining my expansion for over a year. Julian was one of several planted assets." Her stomach tightened. "There are others." "Yes." He gestured toward the conference table where 2 identical copies of the dossier were laid out. "They operate through subtle sabotage, compromised translators, junior analysts, administrative assistants, minor distortions in data, minor shifts in communication. 1,000 tiny cuts," she said. He nodded. "They erode trust until deals collapse on their own." "And me?" she asked calmly. "You were one of their early operations," he replied calmly. "Marcus Thorne heads the division responsible." The name no longer felt distant. It felt personal. "You were removed before you became influential enough to resist them," he added. The truth hurt, but it also strengthened something inside her. Mr. Kwan walked to the table. "My legal team believes we have grounds for a full corporate espionage case, civil and potentially criminal." Her heart began to beat faster. "You want me to testify?" "Yes." He held her gaze. "But that is not why I asked you here." She waited. "The head of my international negotiations division retired last month. The department is exposed." Her breath slowed. "I need someone who understands how language builds and destroys agreements." Silence. "I need someone who knows what it feels like to be targeted." She stared at him. "You're offering me a job." "I am offering you a position," he corrected. "Director of International Negotiations." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "That would put me directly in Omnicorp's path." "Yes." "They will fight." "Yes." "My name would be public again." "Yes." He did not sugarcoat it. He did not soften the risk. He did not soften the risk. "This is not charity," he said. "It is strategy." She believed him. He stepped closer. "Bridges do not fear storms. They are built to withstand them." Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "The strongest structures can bend without breaking." For 2 years, she had tried not to bend at all. She had hidden, survived, disappeared. Now she was being asked to stand in the open, to build again, not despite the fire, but because she had survived it. She lifted her chin slightly. "When do I start?" The announcement went public 2 weeks later. Kwan Industries filed a formal lawsuit. Corporate espionage, fraud, evidence tampering. The business world reacted fast. Markets shifted. News outlets picked up the story. And one name, buried for 2 years, resurfaced overnight. Lena Wallace. Omnicorp denied everything. Marcus Thorne stepped down, temporarily. Internal investigations began. But this time, the foundation didn't crack, because this time, the structure was reinforced. Lena didn't step back into the world quietly. She stepped in prepared. Boardrooms that once dismissed her now watched carefully. Executives who once ignored her now listened closely. And every negotiation she entered carried something new. Not fear, not anger, precision. Omnicorp attempted to disrupt 2 more deals. Both failed. Their quiet sabotage no longer went unnoticed. The storm they used to control now exposed them. 6 months later, regulatory agencies opened a full investigation. Civil penalties followed. Criminal charges were filed against multiple insiders. The empire built on subtle instability began to fracture. And Lena? She never asked for revenge. She built something stronger instead. A department known for airtight agreements, for transparency, for resilience. The girl who once carried trays in silence now led negotiations worth billions, not because someone saved her, but because when truth finally surfaced, she chose to stand in it. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe for more powerful stories about resilience, strategy, and silent strength. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one rebuilding the entire structure.